What if I told you that one of history's most notorious institutions wasn't quite what you think it was? We've all heard the phrase, "Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition." But what if most of what we think we know about this dark chapter of history is based on centuries of misunderstanding, propaganda, and pop culture references? I'm willing to bet that when you hear Spanish Inquisition, your mind conjures images of torture chambers, witch hunts, and religious zealots burning heretics at the stake. But the historical reality is far more complex, and in many ways more interesting, than the caricature we've inherited. Today, we're going to separate fact from fiction and explore what really happened during the Spanish Inquisition. We'll examine its origins, methods, and impact on European society, and you might be surprised to learn that many of our modern assumptions about this institution are actually rooted in centuries-old propaganda rather than historical fact. The Spanish Inquisition lasted for over 350 years and profoundly shaped European history, yet it remains one of the most misunderstood historical phenomena. Stay with me until the end, because we're going to uncover some fascinating details that rarely make it into the history books or popular discussions. Let's start with the basics. What exactly was the Spanish Inquisition, and why was it established? Contrary to popular belief, the Inquisition wasn't created out of thin air as a tool for religious persecution. It emerged during a very specific historical context in late 15th century Spain. In 1478, Spain was still in the process of unifying. The Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella had recently married, joining the crowns of Aragon and Castile. Spain was also in the final stages of the Reconquista, the centuries-long campaign to recapture the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule. This was a time of tremendous political and religious tension. Spain had long been home to large populations of Jews and Muslims who had lived alongside Christians for centuries in what historians call convivencia, a period of relative religious tolerance. However, as the Reconquista neared completion, pressure mounted on non-Christians to convert. Many Jews and Muslims did convert to Christianity, becoming what were known as conversos and moriscos respectively. But suspicion soon arose that many of these converts were secretly practicing their former religions, a phenomenon known as crypto-Judaism or crypto-Islam. The Spanish Inquisition was established primarily to investigate these suspected cases of religious insincerity among converts. This is our first misconception shattered. The Inquisition wasn't primarily targeting practicing Jews or Muslims. It was focused on Christians who were suspected of secretly practicing other faiths. The Inquisition had no jurisdiction over non-Christians. Only baptized Christians fell under its authority. Now, let's talk about the Inquisition's methods. Yes, torture was used, but not in the way or to the extent we might imagine. The Inquisition actually operated under stricter rules regarding torture than the secular courts of the time. Torture could only be used once, was limited in duration, and couldn't result in death or permanent injury. Records show that torture was used in approximately 2% of cases. The Inquisition's primary tools were interrogation, investigation, and public confession. Proceedings began with the Edict of Grace, where individuals were encouraged to confess their heresy voluntarily, often in exchange for lighter penalties. Most cases were resolved through confession and reconciliation rather than harsh punishment. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to thank you for watching this deep dive into historical truth. If you're enjoying this exploration of misunderstood history and want to join us for more videos that challenge popular misconceptions, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell. Your support helps us continue creating content that goes beyond the surface level and explores the nuances of history that are often overlooked. Now, what about those infamous auto de fe and burnings at the stake? This is perhaps the most distorted aspect of the Inquisition in popular culture. Auto de fe, meaning act of faith, was indeed a public ceremony where sentences were pronounced, but it wasn't synonymous with burning people alive, as commonly depicted. The vast majority of sentences were actually quite mild by the standards of the time: penance, fines, or imprisonment. Execution by burning, while certainly used, was relatively rare. Modern historical research suggests that between 3,000 and 5,000 people were executed during the entire 350-year span of the Spanish Inquisition, a far cry from the tens or hundreds of thousands often claimed. For perspective, during the same period, secular courts in other European countries executed far more people for heresy and witchcraft. The witch-hunting craze that swept Europe in the 16th and 17th centuries was much more deadly, with estimates suggesting up to 50,000 executions. Interestingly, the Spanish Inquisition was actually skeptical of witchcraft accusations and often dismissed them. Another misconception is that the Inquisition was somehow outside the law or operated with complete impunity. In reality, the Inquisition was a highly bureaucratic institution with detailed procedures and rules. Cases required multiple witnesses, defendants had the right to legal counsel, and there was even an appeals process. The Inquisition kept meticulous records, which is why modern historians have been able to reconstruct its activities with such precision. This isn't to whitewash the Spanish Inquisition. It was certainly responsible for terrible injustices and suffering. But understanding it in its historical context helps us see that it wasn't uniquely evil for its time, just uniquely well documented and later uniquely well propagandized against. So where did our modern conception of the Spanish Inquisition come from? Much of it stems from what historians call the Black Legend, anti-Spanish propaganda that emerged in Protestant countries like England and the Netherlands during the 16th and 17th centuries. These nations were Spain's political and religious rivals, and they had strong incentives to portray Spanish Catholicism in the worst possible light. Publications like Montañez's discovery and plain declaration of sundry sub-toe practices of the Holy Inquisition of Spain, 1569, presented sensationalized accounts of Inquisition cruelty. These works were widely distributed and became the foundation for centuries of anti-Inquisition literature. The Black Legend was later reinforced during the Enlightenment, when thinkers like Voltaire used the Inquisition as a symbol of religious fanaticism and intolerance. By the time Dostoevsky wrote his famous Grand Inquisitor chapter in The Brothers Karamazov or Monty Python performed their famous Nobody Expects the Spanish Inquisition sketch, the caricature was firmly established in the popular imagination. The legacy of the Spanish Inquisition is complex. It did contribute to the religious homogenization of Spain and the expulsion of Jews and Muslims from the Iberian Peninsula. It created an atmosphere of suspicion that stifled intellectual and scientific inquiry in Spain, while other parts of Europe were experiencing the scientific revolution. And it certainly caused immense suffering for those who fell under its scrutiny. Yet it's worth noting that the Inquisition also established important legal precedents that we now take for granted: the right to defense, the importance of evidence, and the concept that accusations alone aren't enough for conviction. Its methods were often harsh by modern standards. They were sometimes more regulated and systematic than contemporary secular courts. As we wrap up this exploration of the real story behind the Spanish Inquisition, I hope you've gained a more nuanced understanding of this complex historical institution. The truth is rarely as simple as the narratives we inherit, and taking the time to examine primary sources and modern historical research often reveals a much more complicated picture. If you found this video insightful, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm curious to hear, what other historical events or institutions do you think might be widely misunderstood? What aspects of the Inquisition surprised you the most? Your engagement helps this channel continue to grow and allows us to explore more fascinating historical topics. Don't forget to check the description for ways to support the channel and for recommended reading if you want to dive deeper into this subject. And of course, subscribe for more videos that challenge historical misconceptions and explore the nuances of our shared past. Thank you for joining me on this historical journey. Until next time, keep questioning the narratives we take for granted. History is always more complex than it first appears.